I want to delve into one of your signature promises on the campaign trail, which was to end inflation, to lower prices. You are now proposing tariffs against the United States' three biggest trading partners. Economists of all stripes say that ultimately consumers pay the price of tariffs.
I don't believe
Can
it.
you guarantee American families won't pay more?
I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee tomorrow.
Donald Trump recently sat down with Kristen Welker for an interview on Meet the Press, and he said a number of unhinged things that we're probably going to spend the rest of the day unpacking. But one of the biggest moments was when the topic turned to the economy. Not only did Trump repeatedly lie about his own economic record in term one, he finally admitted, under pressure from Welker, that his policies may not cut prices for everyday Americans as he promised, and in fact, prices may increase under his administration, totally shattering a major Trump defense from MAGA. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. As I said, we're probably going to spend the entire day unpacking the number of unhinged things that Trump had to say. But I really want to focus on this one first because Donald Trump won the 2024 election, whether we like it or not. And one of the biggest reasons was because there was a global anti-incumbency trend. People everywhere, in every electorate, in every democracy, voted against or voted outright the incumbent party, in large part because of frustration due to COVID-era inflation. So the economy was a major factor propelling Donald Trump to victory. People had the perception that he's a brilliant businessman. He's going to cut prices. He's going to make things better for everyday Americans. And during the course of this conversation, he totally coughs up, even though he tries to fight it at first. He totally walks back a major campaign promise. So we're going to get to that. But first, let's start with some of the other lies that Donald Trump told about his previous administration.
Sir, your previous tariffs during your first administration cost Americans some $80 billion. And now you have major companies from Walmart, Black & Decker, AutoZone saying that any tariffs are going to force them to drive up prices for their consumers. How do you make sure that these CEOs, that these companies don't, in fact, pass on the cost of tariffs to their consumers?
They cost Americans nothing. They made a great economy for us. They also solve another problem. If we were going to have problems having to do with wars and having to do with other things, tariffs, I have stopped wars with tariffs.
Okay, Donald. So again, he totally sidesteps the question at first. He doesn't want to talk about this because he can't substantively talk policy. Instead, he just lies and says, listen, my previous tariffs cost Americans nothing. It is simply not true. Aggregate analysis of Donald Trump's tariff policy during his first administration have been overwhelmingly negative. Tax Foundation is just one in particular, and this is from a recent article. The Trump administration imposed nearly $80 billion worth of new taxes on Americans by levying tariffs on thousands of products valued at approximately $380 billion in 2018 and 2019, amounting to one of the largest tax increases in decades. This is not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact, and Donald Trump is on the wrong side of the facts. And it's worth noting that the tariffs he's imposing now are substantially greater and less targeted than the ones he imposed in term one. Remember, a 25% tariff on everything coming in from Canada and Mexico, two of our three biggest trading partners? An additional 10% tariff on the ones already levied by President Biden and Trump on China? This would be a staggering mass barrage of tariffs, the likes of which we have not seen, and it would be considerably more. So Trump is just lying. He's just lying to your face, and he's hoping that you don't remember. It's also important to note that so bad was the trade war that Donald Trump started with China that as a consequence of China's tariffs in response, American farmers were suffering immensely under the Trump administration to the extent that Mr. Small Government Trump, Mr. Small Government Republican Party, had to subsidize American farmers with billions of dollars because they were suffering as a consequence of a trade war that Trump started. So his economic record is just bullshit, and he's lying. And Kristen Welker was right. And again, he sidestepped the question of, okay, well, so many major American companies, including Walmart and Black & Decker and all these other places, they're saying that they're going to have to raise their prices if you do what you want to do. He has no answer for it. But we're going to play another clip here and unpack it together.
And we had no inflation. In fact, when I handed it over, They didn't have inflation for a year and a half. They wanted almost 2 years, just based on what I had created. And then they created inflation with energy and with spending too much. So I think we will. I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make.
But he doesn't understand how they work, clearly. But the point before we get to, again, where he finally gives up the game, I just want to remind you, because he said something, he said that it was because of President Biden's spending and energy that inflation increased. Well, we'll get to the spending part, but I just want to say, in point of fact, energy independence is greater under the Biden administration than it ever was under the Trump administration, including pre-pandemic. The United States of America is producing more energy from fossil fuels and alternative energy than at any point previously under the Trump administration. That is simply a fact. Again, not a matter of opinion. So then let's turn to the spending. Well, we've been discussing this on this channel for some time. As Steve Ratner, financial analyst for NBC, points out, this was going back to the first debate between Donald Trump and President Biden. Ahead of tonight's debate, a reminder, Trump added more spending to the budget than Biden and also committed the U.S. to paying more interest on the debt. And he has a graph breaking it down. Net spending increases, net tax cuts, net interest increases, and it's all bigger under Trump. All bigger. As a matter of fact, when you break down the national debt, remember, Trump promised that he would not add a single penny to the national debt when he ran for office the first time. And instead, he added $8 trillion in 4 years, by far the single greatest contribution to the national debt in a 4-year period. That was Trump. By conservative standards, he was wildly fiscally irresponsible, much more so than President Biden, a Democrat. Steve Ratner again points out with a handy graph. In yesterday's economy speech, Trump claimed that the Biden-Harris administration racked up almost $10 trillion in debt. The reality, Trump spent twice as much, added twice as much to the national debt as President Biden. And even if you adjust for COVID, which, by the way, nobody ever grants for Biden, they want us to grade Trump on a curve. I'm not going to do that. I'm not obligated to. But even if I did, I still win the debate against MAGA. We still win the debate against MAGA, because even if you count for non-COVID spending, Donald Trump added more. Staggering stuff. Twice as much. So that gets us to where the game changer here, where, again, for months, Trump said, I'm going to cut prices. You're going to have the best economy in the world. We're going to restore you to pre-pandemic levels. Prices will go. He's done all these things, talking about how he's going to change the American economy in a way that his voters hope that he does. Well, here, after Welker repeatedly pressures him, he finally gives the game away.
I want to delve into one of your signature promises on the campaign trail, which was to end inflation, to lower prices. You are now proposing tariffs against the United States' 3 biggest trading partners. Economists of all stripes say that ultimately consumers pay the price of tariffs.
I don't believe
Can
it.
you guarantee American families won't pay more?
I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee tomorrow, but
Let's just stop right there. We could end the clip right there. We're going to play the rest of it, but we could end it right there. You promised that you would not only end inflation, you would cut prices. And you said you would do so via tariffs. And now, when pressured, you're saying, well, I can't guarantee that. Well, that's precisely what you did on the campaign trail. And you did it in a way that both conservative and liberal economists, again, conservative people who wanted you to win, were scratching their heads and pulling their hair out saying, don't say this. And certainly don't say that you're going to get it done by way of tariff. What are you going to do? Cause a deflationary spiral? Are you going to wreck the economy that way? Donald Trump repeatedly lied to the American people. And now that he's won the election, he's not even inaugurated yet. Now, after pressure, he's like, okay, well, I can't guarantee that, because when prices don't drop the way that he promised you they would, he's going to try to say, well, I couldn't guarantee it. But that's precisely what you did when you were courting people's votes.
I can say that if you look at just pre-COVID, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. And I had a lot of tariffs on a lot of different countries, but in particular China. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars. And we
Again, these things, it ended up becoming, as we discussed at the beginning, one of the biggest tax increases in American history. And it just punished, it brutalized American farmers, such that government subsidies under the Trump administration had to increase to offset the consequences of his trade war. And did we have the greatest economy in American history? In many ways, the Biden economy is just objectively better. Again, I'm not running for office, so I can say that. Whether or not people believe it, the facts are the facts. But even if I grant Trump's premise that the pre-COVID economy was the best in the world, that wasn't single-handedly because of Donald Trump. Trump wants you to believe that. And MAGA Republicans want you to believe it. That Trump was basically the Big Bang. Before him, there was nothing. Or Trump was God. In the beginning, there was Trump. And Trump rubbed his hands together and single-handedly created 50 states, 330 million people, the nuclear arsenal, the entire economic weight of the United States. He single-handedly did it. He inherited nothing good. It was all bad or just nothing at all. And he single-handedly did it himself. It's bullshit. Again, I use this metaphor. Modern American history in terms of economics has been this. Republicans presiding over economic disasters, Democratic administrations coming in and cleaning up the mess, the American people being frustrated with the process and its imperfections, voting in a Republican who presides over an economic mess, then they vote in a Democrat who has to clean it up, rinse and repeat. President Clinton helped correct created an incredible economy after inheriting a mess from President Reagan and President George H.W. Bush. Then President Clinton passes off a really good economy. President Bush, at the end of President Bush's second term, we had the great housing recession, which President Obama then had to spend 2 terms digging us out of. He handed a good economy to Donald Trump. Donald Trump drove it into the ground by his 4th year in office. President Biden was elected to clean up the mess, and now we've just elected Trump again. And again, I can say this because I'm not a candidate, so I can be blunt with you, and you can be blunt with me. We're all voters here. We helped do this by not rewarding Democrats for their good behavior and turning around and giving power back to the people who created the mess in the first place. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's incredibly irrational. But again, to use the metaphor, George W. Bush left Obama a gaping pit in the earth. And then Obama presided over the construction of a tall skyscraper, 100 floors, let's say 100 stories out of 110. He passes off the skyscraper in progress after having built 100 stories to Donald Trump. Donald Trump becomes the new foreman. Trump adds from 100, 110, which is good. It's now taller than it was under Obama, but he didn't do most of the work. The vast majority was done by Obama. Obama went from, -5 to 100, and then Trump took it from 100 to 110. And then in his 4th year, Trump presided over the whole thing collapsing. And then he passed that hole in the earth back off to President Biden. So Trump wants you to believe that he was single-handedly responsible for the quote-unquote greatest economy in the world. But it's bullshit. It's not true. And so I just think it says something that so many people, were saying, well, Trump, he's going to cut taxes. He's going to cut prices. He's going to reverse inflation. He's going to do all these things. Inflation has gotten under control. But by definition, that means that prices are still increasing. We always have inflation. It's about I think it's between 1% and 2%, if I'm not mistaken. That's the Federal Reserve's targeted rate. So we have it back to pre-pandemic levels, but prices are still high and they're not dropping as a consequence. The only way to get them to drop is deflation, right? Which has its own economic implications. So Trump lied to people. Trump made a promise he could not possibly commit. And now he's saying, well, I didn't promise it. I can't guarantee it. And the frustrating thing is now Americans who are hearing about these notions of tariff, even though Trump repeatedly threatened to employ tariffs if he won the presidency, are now Googling what the hell a tariff is, because they didn't know before they voted for him. I mean, it's just stunning. It really is. You have billionaire MAGA Republicans like Bill Ackman trying to talk people off the ledge about Trump's threats about tariff. To be clear, according to Trump, the 25% tariffs will not be implemented, or if implemented, will be removed once Mexico and Canada do what he wants. Guys, calm down. Relax, please. The Guardian talks about this, that Trump's tariff plan will send prices through the roof, warn U.S. firms. U.S. manufacturers are bracing for disruption and sounding the alarm that customers will be hit by price increases, which goes back to what Kristen Welker was talking about. American companies are telling Donald Trump, if you do this, we will pass the price or pass the cost off to consumers, and consumers will have to pay more as a direct linear consequence of Trump's proposed economic policies. And that is why he is now trying to walk this back, totally shattering MAGA Republicans' belief that Trump is going to single-handedly just snap his fingers and lower prices. He lied to you. You were wrong. And he's telling you that you were wrong by admitting that he can't make this guarantee. This is dangerous stuff, folks, and he hasn't even been inaugurated yet. That's where we are. So we've got more to talk about with respect to this interview. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.